I'm live again at 7 o'clock. What's up? I'm going to try to fix my camera and zoom. And I'm out of focus. And I'm in focus. There we go. Okay. We're back live again. I'm going to talk to you tonight about a couple things. First of all, I just posted a video up. So you guys, if you haven't taken a look, I'll go ahead and put a note down here. 305 versus 350 small block Chevy. So which one of those would you choose? That's what that video is all about. Obviously, you always choose the bigger one because the 350 is obviously always better than a 305. But that's assuming that you have nothing and are choosing between those two. It also assumes that both of those are the same price, which they would be at the wrecking yard. But really, the video is also aimed at not just a guy that has nothing is going to a wrecking yard to pick something up, which is some of us, but also for a guy that already has a 305. Let's face it, Chevy sold a lot of 305s out there in all kinds of things. They obviously, the one that we picked happened to come from a 5-liter 305 tune port application from the Chevy race shop. So it would have been in an IROC or a Firebird or something like that, which they should have used that motor in trucks, as we all know. We've all talked about that. The tune port combination would have been the best truck motor of all of them. But they had it in that. They had it in throttle body injected form. They had it in, they ran 305s in Vortec form. I mean, there's a lot of 305 stuff. So it's often, it's much maligned is what I always say, because everyone says, oh, 305, that's the small bore motor, that's the low performance deal. But lots and lots of 305s back in the day were fighting it out against the 302 Fords. And as we know, that was actually a good battle. If you look at a, period correct Camaro versus a 5-liter Mustang, it was actually a fairly good race. They were very comparable. I know because I drove those a lot back in the day. I was looking at a Camaro before I bought my 5-liter LX Mustang to go showroom stock racing, which is why that I bought it. But I obviously drove the competition first. I drove the Camaro. And the one thing I didn't like about the IROC back then was I didn't like how long the dash was. It like I was looking over this plateau that was 9 feet long worth of dashboard before you got to the hood. So that was one thing, and it's obviously a fairly minor thing, but they offered similar performance. They both had 5 speeds. They both had about the same power. They both had good torque curves. The weights were comparable. You see all the road tests from back in the day. They were actually very comparable. So my question is, in that video, first of all, a couple things. Can you make good power with a 305? And yes, you can, especially there are some decent cylinder heads out there. Obviously, you could port a stock one, but, I don't know why you'd have an iron head on anything. You can also put lots of aftermarket heads on them. Not lots. There are some. We used the Trick Flow Super 23, had the 175. And what I would like to see is a ported version of that. Yes, Tim, I agree. The Camaro is huge. Yeah, with the windshield. The thing that I liked about the Camaro, and I almost wish that I would have taken the Camaro, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is $499 customs, the 305 to the front. The reason I actually wish I would have taken the Camaro is right after I got my motor, or right after I got my 5-liter Mustang, guys started bringing the 1LE Camaros. And the thing that my Mustang didn't have, it handled fairly well for sure. Yeah, JD Car Guy, $2. You guys, honestly, I much appreciated, and that's why I instituted this Super Chats thing. I'm not expecting that, so I will answer all of your questions, and all of that's going to continue the way that it was. When I'm actually raising money for stuff, I will come to you guys and say, hey, look, we're trying to finish up this project on the 3800 Series 2 motor, and I need to get the flywheel, or I need to get the bell housing or something like that. And so I'll be raising money for certain things. And when I do, then you guys can certainly help out. And all of that is awesome. But back to my discussion on the Camaro and the Mustang, when the 1LE guys came out, they just would kill the Mustang. I could run, we could handle with them when we had power and stuff, but the Mustang never really had very good brakes. So every time I'd take that Mustang down there and show them stock race it, because I would drive it down there. I didn't have a trailer. I didn't have a truck. I drove my race car down there and raced. And by down there, I meant Southern California. So we would race, but I would go through brakes. I would go through definitely pads, but usually rotors and sometimes calipers also. But the Camaro guys, having front and rear disc brakes and better brakes than I had on the 1LE package, they had better handling than I did. We had a little bit lighter weight. They had, they had good brakes, and they could run, they could drive and drive it hard and not have the brakes go out, which was a big plus back in, when you're showroom stock racing. And as I found out when I first started showroom stock racing, there was stock, which was what my car was. I bought it and then put a cage in it, went out and raced. And then there was showroom stock, which is what those other guys were doing. And it was a completely different thing. Their cars were not nearly as stock as my car, as I would later find out. And, I thought I could just drive around that because I was the greatest driver in the world, which also wasn't true. So I had a lot of things going against me. John did a test a long time ago for CarCraft where they made over 500 with a 5-liter with a 305, and it's certainly possible because if you get past the 305, green bean heart, that's awesome. I'll pretend to buy you lunch or a beer, or any kind of thing is great. That means I can get biggie fries when I go get stuff. But yeah, if you stop thinking about it, oh, that's a small bore motor, or that's not a performance motor, and realize that a 305 is actually just a small block Chevy, which is a good start. And that if you put heads on a small block Chevy, you put a camshaft, you put the right intake, all of that stuff works out. So it will make power. All you have to do is give it enough stuff. And with a 305, you can certainly do that. I mean, take a look at it. We've made 500 horsepower with 4.8 liters. And their bore isn't much bigger than the 305. So it's not a big difference. You certainly can do that if you get good heads on it and good intakes. And then when you take the 305 like we did, if you take a look at some of the other videos, we added boost to it, which every motor, boost makes everything better. So when we ran a torque storm on it, it made good power as a 305 would, and as any motor would. And obviously, as we talked about in that thing, there's no comparison between a 350 and a 305. If you can get both of them, you might as well get the bigger one. For that matter, you might as well get a 400-inch motor if you can. If you can get that, they're not as common, but it is a better deal. So if you can get a bigger motor, definitely do that. And everybody then chimed in and wanted to see, okay, well, we want to see a comparison between a small bore and a bigger stroke, and then a bigger bore and a smaller stroke. So a 302 versus a 305 kind of thing, even though they haven't made a 302, since 1969, basically. And that might be an interesting thing too. Although again, I think that we do what I call the big picture thing and then the small picture thing. The big picture thing is that if you have the same displacement and compression and head flow and cam timing and induction system, they're going to make really close to the same power. To find a difference in rod ratio or bore and stroke, that kind of thing, really takes a concerted effort on it. And I think what people would realize if we did that kind of test is the difference from those things would be very, very small, much smaller than it would be from a simple change in displacement. So let's get to some questions and we'll talk about that. Tim, you're right. The 307 is a whole different thing compared to the 305, different bore and stroke. It is a slightly smaller stroke, is a 327 stroke, and a slightly bigger bore, but it works out good. Admiral Peck wants to know, hey Richard, you've been to Texas? I have been to Texas, but I haven't spent time there driving around or doing anything with machine shops. So I don't have anybody that I could recommend that could put that motor together though. Josh wants to know on the eBay GT45, any long-term concerns on a street car? I'd like to tell you that they last forever, and I'd also like to tell you that no, you shouldn't get them, that they break immediately. The reality is it's probably somewhere in between. I've never had any problems with the ones that we've had. They've never broken. They've lasted years, and we've run them a lot on the dyno. That's not the same as driving them on the street. What I can tell you is if you buy a $163 turbo and you use it for a year and it blows up, you just buy another one. I mean, that's pretty cheap. CB11, do I prefer a 305 or a 350? It depends on, again, that's the situational thing. It depends on what you're trying to do. If I'm going to the wrecking yard and getting a small block, I'm probably not going to get a 305 unless I'm doing it specifically to get a 305 to test 305 things. If I'm going to get the most power, you would obviously get the bigger motor. Narcoleptic Customs, can I add a GT45 to my Crown Vic? And can I push it to 300 at the tires? I think your Crown Vic, if it's a 2-valve motor, probably has 19-pound injectors in it, and that probably would be too much. You have to put at least 24s, and I would go to 30s or 36s or something if you're going to do that. Corbo wants to know, can a set of heads outflow or overflow for a small cubic inch engine? You can put a set of heads on an engine that it can't utilize, but I honestly haven't seen where you put a set of heads on and it really hurts the combination. If you looked up at the videos, I have videos where we ran 170, 195, 210, and 225 heads on a 306, and we also ran those same combinations on a bigger 363. Now, obviously, the 363 could take more advantage of it, but it didn't seem to hurt the 306 very much, having the big head on it. The one thing I can tell you is we're doing wide open throttle, so you might see some more of an issue at part throttle on a bigger port volume like that. But judging by the wide open throttle stuff, it's not that, oh, it just killed the power, because that's not what happens. William said, hey, Richard, I've looked through your playlist with no luck. Have you done any testing on a PTE LS Series 7675? Yeah, I've run a Precision 7675 a lot. We've run that a ton. It was a really expensive one. It was a billet wheel and it's a CEA and it had all the bells, whistles and stuff. But we've run that a lot. There should be a bunch of stuff up there where we run that turbo. And I think that turbo was about... we may have come close to 1200 with that turbo on the right combination. What are you, $2 Chuck? What are you auctioning? I'm not auctioning off anything today. I do have stuff that I'm going to get rid of, but nothing I'm going to do on camera. I don't think I have anything that's going to go away right now. I'm actually, like I said, I'm not. All of these things aren't designed to try to raise money. If I have specific things, I will come on here and talk to you about it and see what we can do. And then I will take that money directly and get what I need, like I said, to get things specifically for a dyno test or something, and which would be awesome. But otherwise, I'm not going to, that's actually why I hesitated even doing super chats and stuff, because I don't want every live feed to be that kind of thing. I'm not, this isn't a money-making thing for me. So I'm not interested. Then again, it's all appreciated and I love it, but I don't want to come on every time and think that you guys are expecting me to chime in with money, because that's not the case. I actually just come on to hang out with car guys and talk to car guys, which is what I like. Jake wants to know, if I unplug my alternator on my old diesel, will it damage the alternator? No, it shouldn't hurt the bearings or anything. Admiral wants to know, can we see an old LS cross ram intake tested at high RPM? What old LS cross ram are you talking about? If you're talking about the test that I do want to do is the Crossfire, the L83 stuff on the small block Chevy. I do want to run one of those, which I think would be cool, and do some things with it. Turbo 32 coupe. I built the GT40 boosted 350 in a 1,700-pound 27 coupe. That should be plenty exciting and plenty fun. Oh, William, is the LS series different? Is that their lower cost version? If that is, I haven't run one of those. Michael wants to know, is a 75mm throttle body too much on a mild 5-liter? It's not. You could put any size throttle body on there you want, and you'll never hurt power. What will happen is the opening rate of the throttle body will make drivability a little more sketchy, but it won't change power at all. If you go to wide open throttle, even at 2,000 RPM, the bigger throttle body will not change power. It will only draw in as much air as the motor can draw in, and the throttle body's not restricting that at all and not helping that at all, because probably at that RPM range, any throttle body will provide enough flow. Silverado wants to know, 42-pound injector swap benefits on LQ9. Yes, if you need to put the injector size in the motor for the power output that you want the motor to make. So if you're trying to make, like, for instance, a 42-pound injector can make somebody quickly do 42 times 16, and that will give you an idea on how much power that thing can make. And so if you're trying to make that much power, you need to have the injector size for that. And then if you put that big of an injector in, obviously you're going to have it tuned as well, because the bigger injector, NZ, $5, New Zealand. That's my New Zealand guys, man. New Zealand, what time is it right now in New Zealand? I'm thinking about scheduling different live feeds for different parts of the world now that I have people from all over, which again is just so many different kinds of awesome, to maybe doing 1 or 2 different live streams for different places around the world. Because I got people from England and the Middle East and Australia, obviously. I love the guys in Australia. We could just hang around and talk about Cleveland and stuff. So let me know what time it is. Someone should do a blown Coyote in a 3rd gen. Yeah, I've run blowers on Coyotes. We did a Gen 1 Coyote, and it obviously all of those things like boost, they do very well. Okay, it's right now. It's 4:15 Wednesday afternoon, so this is actually a fairly good time for you, right? Unless you're at work, I guess. Mike wants to know if a 76 millimeter turbo is too small for a Pontiac 400. It depends on your power level. Tell me well, 2 things. First of all, tell me what power level you're trying to get, and also what 76 millimeter you're trying to do. Because a T76, which is they call a 76 millimeter from CX Racing, and lots of other guys sell that, is about a 700 horsepower turbo. But a 76 millimeter, you know, like the 76, 75 precision turbo that we had is like a 1200 horsepower turbo. So even though those have the same name, they're definitely not the same turbo and the same possible power output. Corbett wants to know how much NOS you can run on a stock big block Chevy rod. Take a look at the Boneyard Boost video that I did, where we ran turbos, we run blowers, run all kinds of stuff on stock bottom end big block Chevys, the Gen 6 stuff. So you can run a lot of power on them. Jody wants to know what's the rule of thumb for injectors for power. Yeah, if you multiply the injector flow rate, and when I did a video on this before, Jason, $4.99. I did a video on that before. If you multiply the flow rate of the injector, like if you have a 40 pound an hour injector, multiply that by 16, and that will tell you how much power that injector can support naturally aspirated. Give you a pretty good idea. And the reason for that is the flow rate of the injector in pounds per hour. It takes a half a pound of fuel per hour roughly to make 1 horsepower. We can do better than that. Lots of motors do better than that, but it's a good rough estimate. A half a pound of fuel. So each pound of fuel will make 2 horsepower. You've got 8 injectors. And so if you do the math there, just multiply the flow rate of 1 injector times 16, that will tell you how much power you can make. Deca 80s would be fine for 650 wheel horsepower. We've done right at 1,000 on gas, and on E85 you can do less than that. But E85 would be okay at 650 at the wheels on an 80 pound injector, as long as you have enough pump and you have enough static pressure and you have a rising rate fuel pressure regulator that goes up at a 1-to-1 rate with boost. Chris Henderson, 210 pound injectors with twin GT45s. 210 pound injectors is way more than enough injector to support 2 GT45s. 2 GT45s is going to be at the maximum probably around 13 or 1400 horsepower. So if you're trying to make that, that's a lot. Oh, Admiral said I was talking about Holley Edelbrock cross rams for LS motors. Okay, spell check. You want to rev them higher. Robert Smith is in for $5. Thank you, Robert. And then your question is on the GT40, about 650 wheel horsepower. What is a good octane to run, and how do you understand back pressure that's okay? A GT40, are you talking about a GT40 intake manifold or GT40 head or a GT45 turbo? If you're talking about GT45 turbo, 650 wheel would be a lot on a GT45 turbo. That would be pushing a lot of it, and it would be better to run that turbo on a small motor like a 4.8 than it would be to run it on a 6-liter or a 454 or something like that. Have you ever seen a chiller killer for intercooling? Use the AC system? Yeah, the Dodge did that, I think, on one of their on maybe the Demon or one of those cars. They use it, and I've seen it done. It's fairly complicated, and it's a temporary use kind of thing. We're going to do something different on the dyno. I'm going to do liquid nitrogen, which would bring it even cooler. And then the guys from the compressed air system have charge temperatures that are below zero because of the way that the compressed air system works. So that's why they're able to gain 100% of power at only 7 or 8 pounds of boost, which is really, really cool because they have really, really cold air going in there, which is awesome. Hobbs wants to know, and Hobbs and Shaw, I'm sure, together, right? Have you heard that they're coming out with a 6.8 liter engine? No, I don't get the early updates from what's going on with the manufacturers and stuff. They don't seem to talk to me. I think I spend too much time in wrecking yards. Sinister Silverado stepping up for $10. I have a 305 Chevy that's been worth 40 over. Okay, 450 lift cam and 650 Holley for it. I need some heads. The best junkyard head for you to put on there is a 305 Vortec head. Make sure that they're not cracked. And then you might have to do a 450 lift cam should be right at the limit of, you should be able to maybe just do a spring upgrade on the Vortec head. If not, and you have to machine it a little bit, it's not a big deal. But that Vortec head will work really good on a 305. It'll make good power. Isaac wants to know, what do you think about small block Chevy 355 with twin HX35s, opposite banks with twin 44 millimeters at 10 pounds? That should be fine. You're running fairly low boost for the for those two turbos. Admiral's in for $5. Thanks, Admiral. $5. Okay, I was talking about the Holley Edelbar cross ram earlier. Yeah, are you talking about wanting to run them at high RPM? Because neither one of those manifolds are high RPM manifolds. The cross ram manifolds are actually really long runner, and so they're designed to make power lower than, they actually make more low speed power than factory manifolds do, which is good. And they also make a little bit more peak power than the factory manifolds do, which is also good, but they're not designed for high RPM. So I don't think you should go more than about 7,000 on either one of those. Yeah, Chris, the Garrett 70 millimeters probably would be better for if you're looking to get 1,500 horsepower. MX guy wants a big bang 305. I actually want to do a big bang, but probably won't do a 305. We'll probably do a 350. And I'm sure guys will argue, well, but the 305 has a smaller bore and better head gasket sealing and thicker sleeves and yada, yada, yada. I want to do it on a Vortec 350, but I probably won't do it with a Vortec head on it, even though guys will probably want me to. I want to do it with an aftermarket head because we want the motor to make power in addition to, I don't want to have to run 1,000,000 pounds of boost to get to the limit of wherever the stock bottom end is. We also want to make some power while we're doing it. So if we take a Vortec bottom end and put ring gap in it and then put good heads and cam and intake manifold on it and then run boost on it, I think it would be kind of cool to find out, to see what the, conventional small block Chevy will do. We know that we've done 1,000 horsepower, so we know it's not there. We know it's somewhere else besides that. Toxin Frost wants to see a Chevy 8.1 versus a Ford 7.3. I don't think that would be much of a competition, though, would it? I mean, an 8.1 is going to make more power. Although the 7.3, that motor is pretty impressive. Jake wants to know, why is a tunnel ram a high RPM manifold? A tunnel ram, lots of tunnel rams are actually not high RPM manifolds. They have long enough runners that they make better power than a single plane all the way up to the power peak. But unless you get a tunnel ram that has a really short runner, it's not a high RPM manifold. A tunnel ram actually makes much better average power than a single plane does because all the runners are the same length. They're all basically the long runners of the single plane. So tunnel ram is not high RPM necessarily. Really short tunnel rams are, but longer ones are not. It's all just runner length. Matthew wants to know turbo Gen 4 5.3 or a built LS3. It would be much cheaper for you to do a 5.3 than it would be an LS3. You could make all of the power that you want. If you start with an L33 aluminum 5.3 and add boost to it, there's guys doing 1,500 horsepower with that kind of stuff. Robert's in for $2. Okay, I meant the GT45 best octane and back pressure for 650 horsepower. That's the problem you run into depending on what motor you're putting it on. If you try to put a GT45 on it, you're trying to make 650 horsepower, especially 650 wheel horsepower, you're going to be getting into a back pressure issue. If you did it on a small motor like a 4.8, you'll be better off. If you're trying to do it on a 6-liter, you're going to run into back pressure, which is going to cause you to need to run higher octane. Like E85 is a really good choice for something like that. Paul wants to know if I can compare real engine dyno sessions to dyno sim 5 stuff. I don't use simulators. I think that they're a good idea for telling you trends, but I've never seen one that tells me what the dyno does. It never does a curve that what I've seen people try to do with simulators is take real data from a dyno and then try to make the simulator do what the dyno did. By continuing to manipulate it and put in information. That's not, to me, that's not real world stuff. Like I said, the simulators are cool. And if they can tell you, hey, look, if all this was happening, here's what we think would happen, that's good. But it doesn't actually tell you what happened. It tells you what might happen. And that's kind of a different thing. Admiral, you don't have to you don't have to keep stepping up with money. Obviously, very much appreciated, but I will try to answer all the questions that I can. And you can also send something to my email if you have another question that I don't answer during the live chat. I also want to ask on the topic of custom intakes, how good of an idea do you think a long runner on a Whipple would be? They're really good. If you take a look at, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I don't even know if it's out yet, but Freiberger just did a test on a big block Chevy with a big roots blower on a big block. And he ran the conventional small, short runner intake that everybody runs with the blower. And then he also ran that blower on top of a tunnel ram. And so what do you guys think happened? Longer runners make more power basically everywhere, because the short runners that everybody uses, like if you look at a 3800 Series 2 V6, look at the manifold that's on it. And most blower manifolds, roots blower manifolds are like that. They're very, very short runners. And that doesn't help power production. If the runners are longer and you're blowing into it, it makes more power because that's what runner length does. So longer runners, a tunnel ram under an Eaton blower or a Kenny Bell or a Whipple or any kind of positive displacement blower or any kind of blower or any turbo, runner length will make more power. HU 3.7, I know that even distribution to each cylinder can be a problem with water meth. It can be if it's a long runner deal. Have you ever tried doing individual port injection? I have not yet, and I would like to, though. Isaac, yeah, thanks, Isaac, $10 for live chat. But Isaac, when you do that, you got to have a cool question ready. You got to say, hey, look, Richard, pay attention to me. I donated money. So now I get to be like head of the class and I get to stand up and I get to ask my question and you have to answer it. You're obliged to answer it. I'll answer everybody's question if I can. But, make sure that you have a cool question or a comment to tell me to be quiet or, you can say anything you want. Clayton, 408 stroker with rec ports, 11.2 to 1 compression, trying for 1,200 wheel horsepower. With what single turbo will get me there? Some sort of S480 or bigger, or a real Garrett turbo. A lot of the GT45 series probably would get you there. You're going to need a fairly good size hot side for a 408 because that's got a lot of displacement. I'm assuming you have a fairly good camshaft in it, and I'm assuming that thing is going to be probably 600 horsepower or more NA would be pretty easy with a 408. And then so you're not going to have to run a lot of boost to get there, which would be the good thing. Nick Nasty wants a remote mount supercharger test for the 3800. We're not going to do that, but we're going to run the blower and then we're going to run turbo blowing into the blower. So we're going to remote mount the turbo if that counts. Matthew says an L33 is a Gen 3. An L33 is actually a Gen 4 motor and not the L83. If you wanted an L83 is a Gen 5. So those are different engine families. Admiral wants to see a video on stage injection. We did run stage injection with Tom from West Tech on the motor that we did for the I can't remember if it was on the Hyundai or if it was on the Volkswagen, but one of them we had two sets of injectors. We had a high and a low one, and when you raise the injection point farther away from the port, you get more charge cooling and you make more power. If you take a look at the video that I have up, Clayton is on the leaderboard for 20 bucks. If you take a look at the video that I did on the individual runner stack injection on the Honda B series, where we move the injectors out in front of the stack, that's what you're doing. Basically, you're getting more time for charge cooling. Linwood, nice. Keep up the great work. Love your videos. This is the least I could do. Again, I'm not raising money for anything. You guys are helping out, and I love it. But I don't want all of these videos to be about that. I just want it to be about us getting together and hanging out and talking car guy stuff, and hopefully I can answer some questions. There's also some obviously other real smart guys on there. They're answering some questions too, so thanks guys for doing that. But yeah, if you move the injectors away from the valve, basically the longer the length has, the more time there is for cooling, the greater the power gain that you get. So yeah, stage injection definitely can work if there's a spacing between the two. That's what we did. That's why we did it. We did it for charge cooling. We didn't do it. Some guys do stage injection because they can't get enough fuel flow through one set of injectors, or the injector has to be so big that the drivability part of it's not any good. So they run two smaller injectors, and then they can get drivability with the primary one and then ramp in the second one when they need a bunch of extra fuel. So that's typically why they would do stage injection on that. Robert Smith, 331 stroker with an F303 cam, Pro Comp head, GT45 intake. What's a good octane and back pressure and ring gap? Ring gap should be about 30 thousandths. Octane, you should run E85 if you have a turbo. That works best. Timing, you're going to have to play with. Whatever the NA timing is, we would normally run like at the power peak, probably would be around 20 or 21 degrees or so under boost, and then it would be lower than that at the torque peak. But that's something you have to find out on the dyno to find out what actually works, because every GT40 head is not going to have the same detonation threshold, and your timing might vary, and your cooling and all that. There's a lot of things going on there. Walter wants to know if there's any way to see if ring gap will affect a compression test. Honestly, I don't think it does. I don't think it does at all. Because even on a cranking compression test, it's happening fairly fast. So the time at which it has to compress the air, there's very, very little time for that to leak out unless the leak is very big. And I don't know that you'd see that. I've never tried that, though. That might be an interesting test to see if there's anything there. I know while the motor is running, we didn't see any power change. So if you're Costas fella, Richard, we need more dyno results for Gen 7 8.1. I agree. The big 496. We do need to do some of that, and I've talked to some guys about that. Frankie's in for $9.99. The $10 chuck. What cylinder heads would you recommend on a twin turbo LQ4 running twin 7875s and a BTR Stage 3 twin turbo cam? Any of the if you're going to do a cathedral port, guys have lots of good luck with the ASCAS 220 trick flow heads. If you want to run a rec port, I would go with like an Airflow Research or a Mast. Probably those are good heads. I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make. If you have twin 7875s, you can make a lot of power. But really, with almost any head combination you're going to put in there, you're going to be able to make a lot of power. Let's see. I have a 2004 5.3 Stage 4 V2 cam kit. What's a good stall converter? I'm not a stall converter guy. The Stage 4 is fairly big. You're going to need something that's going to be 2,800 to 3,000, I'm thinking. But talk to a converter guy, because I'm not really a converter guy. RT wants a V6 turbo test. What kind of? You have to be more specific about that. We have run somebody had mentioned, I think Tim is answering questions for somebody that's asking about diesel turbo stuff. We've run a number of whole set turbos from diesels on 5 liters and various other things, and they work good. Isaac wants to know how would I be able to email you. Here, I'll put my email address. It's up on the channel, but except it's not all caps. It's all lowercase. Kirby16@aol.com. The other thing I wanted to mention to you guys before I get off, I have somebody that's talked to me about doing some shirts. So the two shirts I'm thinking about to begin with is Wrong Cam, which would be one of them, and Every Cam is a Turbo Cam is the other one probably. So those are probably the two shirts that we will start off with. So I will let you know when I have the first version of that, and we'll do a live feed, and we'll all sit around. We can talk about that, and I'll show you what they look like, and you guys can tell me if you like those, and that might be something you'll be interested in, and then we could maybe get some orders going or something, because I probably will do that and not do it through Teespring or one of those guys yet. We'll do it a different way to start out with, and then if we get lots of people that are interested in it, we'll proceed from there. Can you twin turbo an LS 5.3 with a T6 S475? Yeah, you can run two of those. It's going to be really laggy, and it would be something that you would want to make 2,000 horsepower with and rev really high. I don't know why you would. We ran two S475s on the 6-liter, but they were T4 S475s. And so that's you don't need that much flow in a twin setup for that big of an exhaust. You could just put one on there and make 1,000 horsepower if that's what you want to do. Backyard built trucks. I have two 7875s on a 468, and it does very good. Yeah, that's a good combination. We have two of those S475s we ran on the big block, and they really, really like it. Nick Nasty wants to know, will injectors above the stack or runner like a common plum still work? Yes, if you take a look at the, a lot of the guys have the injector outside of that, and then they basically have a little narrow V going down to the inlet of the opening. If you look up the old Formula One stuff and look at the plenums that they made, and you can see how they did it. But they have the injectors blowing into the top of the radius entry on the intake manifold. That works pretty well. The problem is that you get fueling kind of going everywhere. So a lot of guys will put it actually kind of inside a little bit. And, if you have a boosted application and you're running a good intercooler, that becomes less of a concern, although you can get more cooling, especially if you're running E85 or something. Lipton's asking a question that I don't understand. Why then the new engine 7.3-liter Ford put a hole in the head for injectors? Is it bad for cooling? I don't know what you're talking about. Is the hole in the head bad for cooling? I don't understand what your question is. Julian, so I believe I heard you say it's possible to make big power on a factory conventional small block rotating assembly. I want to run mid-10s in my 1500 pickup. Mid-10s is like, you're talking about 600 at the tire or something. That's not really very much. You can easily do that. Junkyard Boost King, yeah. The Horse Lemonade, Honda D Series Big Bang. I think the most we've ever tried to do on a D Series was it wasn't a lot. It was 350 or so at the tire that we ran one. And it was a stock bottom end. I think he might have done ring gap on it. I think that they ended up putting a small cam in it, but it wasn't even a lot of boost. It wasn't the all of it kind of range. It was even a small turbo. I think it was a kit from the guys at CX Racing. So it wasn't, getting crazy. Oh, the chat needs a moderator. So do we got to block somebody? Okay, what else we got going on? What is the ideal injector size for a turbo LS on E85 700 horsepower max? An 80-pound injector is cheap and it's easy to get, and so you could use that on E85 for 700 horsepower without any problem. Richard wants to know if I have any more giveaways. Yeah, we'll do a giveaway with the shirts as soon as we're ready. Rodrigo wants to know, what about the J series? I'm assuming you're talking about the J series Honda. I'm definitely going to do a V6 Honda. Andrew wants a blown big block Chevy test headers versus zoomies. The guys from Engine Masters did that, but I don't think that they did it on a blown big block. I think that they may have done it on a standard one. I don't know for sure. I know that they tested that. I just don't remember what the test motor was. I'd have to ask Brule to find out what that is. Alex says a VTEC V8 and VVT exists. There's lots of VVT stuff. There's some stuff that adds lift, but there's nothing that I know of that has two cam profiles like VTEC does, other than the one that very cool guy is building with the two K-series cylinder heads. Tim wants to know, when you test the 3800 Series 2, are you going to test the same boost, compound, and turbos alone? We have an NA intake manifold, and I am going to run it just turbocharged. We're going to run it compound also, and I can run it at the same boost so we can compare it if that's what you're trying to do. Usually the turbo makes more power by itself than it does in a compound form, especially if you measure it at the same boost. The supercharger tends to get in the way. In that case, the supercharger would help with response rate if you have a really big turbo on there, but we don't have to run a really big turbo on that small motor. Even to do a big bang on it, we only need probably a single, I don't know, S475 or something. The Manitarium, can I turbo a 98 Chevy 350 and still retain the TBI? I don't think you can. The problem is the available fuel flow. The throttle body itself, even if you put the big block throttle body on there, it's still going to be kind of restrictive, but I'd worry less about the airflow than your ability to get fuel to it. And that's usually the problem. Some guys have switched over to running a direct port manifold, and then you could blow through that, but you have to get rid of the factory computer and all that stuff too. So it's kind of hard to do that. The way that Vortec and guys did it way back in the day is they had additional injectors plumbed before in the tube, basically in the discharge tube. And again, that's not ideal. On a throttle body injected one, that wouldn't be too bad because where you're injecting the fuel anyway is not ideal. So it can kind of work, but you'll never really make too much power with that, unfortunately, with the throttle body injected deal. Rodrigo wants to know what transmissions hook up to the Series 2. The Camaro and the Firebird had a Series 2 3800 V6, like in 95, 96, kind of right in that range. And they had a manual T5 trans, I think it was, and that bell housing will remove from the trans, and we can use that. Durham's in the house with $2. Elbrock Victor Jr. Sportsman 2V intake TBI. Is that are we talking about a TBI 350 Chevy or a 2V46, or I don't know which one you're talking about, but you got to let me know so I can answer your question. Sam wants to know if I have any plans to get a ProFlow XT on a small block Chevy. I don't think I've run one of those on a small block. I think we've run the Edelbrock on the ProFlow on an LS, but I don't remember doing it on a small block. Dudes of Hazard, how would you consider a Pontiac 301 to a 305 with a carbon headers? I'd like to see if that would be a good other guys build. I think the 301 would be definitely, it's definitely other guys. Now a 301 turbo would be even awesomer. The 301s we don't see too often. Oh, Durham says it's a 2-barrel intake manifold. Okay. Well, we did an intake upgrade on the throttle body because I ran a throttle body, or tried to run a throttle body 305 test, and I had all kinds of stuff. I had the bigger throttle body, I had the bigger injectors, I had different intake manifolds. We had all kinds of stuff. But the problem ultimately is getting enough fuel to all that. Like when we take that stuff off and just put a carburetor on there, it actually works a whole lot better. Joe wants to know if I've tried and done decap stock injectors. I have not. We have Snake Eater performance injectors, which I think that's what they are, if I remember right. I haven't. The only ones I've tried is way back in the day. Steve from Powertrain did a set for me. Did a set of 36-pound injectors, so the Bosch ones, and we made them into 65s or something like that. And we used those for a long time. But if you're going to do that, make sure you flow them to make sure that they're all the same, because that's one of the problems is consistency with decapping the stock injectors. Jeff wants to know at what point you step up from a Holley Terminator to a Dominator. We have both at West Tech, so we use them. We interchange them. We don't ever have to run so many channels that we need a Dominator, at least on the engine dyno. Dominator controls transmission, so that's normally why guys step up to that. So they want trans control, and then they want other channels to data log stuff. So that's when guys go to the Dominator setup. Admiral, you're back again with $2. What's going on? Can we see a test with mechanical fuel injection? Brulés run mechanical injection on a lot of customer stuff there, and it works. The problem with mechanical injection is getting it to work like in all three important phases, I call it. So getting it to idle, and then getting it to run at part throttle, and then getting it to run at wide open throttle. So getting all three of those is really hard with mechanical injection because of the limited adjustability that you have on that. And then actually getting it to run at wide open throttle. A lot of guys run methanol on mechanical injection stuff, like guys are out at Bonneville and things. The other problem then, even at wide open throttle, is getting it to run at the right air fuel, supplying the right amount of fuel. For the air part is easy. Getting it to supply the right amount of fuel through a given RPM range. That's kind of hard with mechanical fuel injection. Like a Crower stack, something from the old Can-Am days, that kind of thing. It's difficult given what you have to work with. And it's a real science. Brulé is actually pretty good at it. Jacob wants to run nitrous LS with a Holley high-rise intake and a Holley 1471 diameter. What cam do you recommend? Jacob, I don't know what the 1475 thing is. But what I can tell you is when you're running nitrous, try to make as much power as you can NA. Then whatever you're adding from the nitrous will just be on top of what you're doing. John Ellis Cross Ram twin turbo for $25. I would have answered your question for nothing, John. Matt Happel is doing a Holley Cross Ram twin turbos, and you definitely can do that. Because there's two openings, it's nice and symmetrical that you'd have two turbos, one feeding each one of those. But honestly, the intake will perform the same if you just had a single turbo and wide into the two openings. The cross ram tests are up on the channel right now. I did a video on those. They work very well. They make good power. They make good low speed power, which will help turbo response, and that will obviously improve having twin turbos. Plus, it looks awesome. Camaro Rick, how about an old late 70s L48, 8.5 to 1, 190 horsepower boost? You can do that. If you look on the channel, I did an L82, which is basically one step above an L48. And you can see what kind of power that made. I think it was around 300 or 310. So super high performance L82 from back in the day. An L48 would have been a little less than that, the way that we run it. And you can certainly add power to that. Gail Banks did a bunch of those back in the day. Shadow Ops, be nice to make a 4.8 liter into a 302, a 305, 307. Yeah, an LS motor is going to make more than a small block Chevy of any kind of displacement. I mean, it's a better motor. It has better cylinder heads. It has windage tray. It has a lot of things that the small block doesn't have. So I don't think anybody thinks that a 305 is going to make as much as a 4.8. It's just not going to do that. Dominic, $5, fresh LQ4, no ring gap, small Howard's cam, OEM headset, 6 to 10 pounds intercooled, big bang, or no? You should run an intercooler on it if that's what your question is, and you should also run ring gap. You should run both of those. You can get away with running boost on motors that you haven't checked the ring gap on, because you don't know what it is. And a lot of guys have done that and just run it and just said, hey, I'm just going to do it anyway. We've done that. We've got motors from the wrecking yard, put them up on the dyno, ran 300 shots of nitrous on them. and we ended up hurting one, but not before we ran lots and lots of shots on it. So you can get away with stuff without doing the ring gap. But if you're going to do it and you're going to do it and you're going to have it in your car for a long time, just put ring gap in it. And yes, I always recommend an intercooler no matter what kind of fuel you're running. I agree, Tim. The L82 did very well. It had the lowest compression. Unfortunately for the L82, we were comparing it to the L79 and the L46, which is the 350 horse 350 and the 350 horse 327. Both of those had much higher compression. They had better camshafts, different induction systems, and so they had a leg up basically on the L82. But the L82 wasn't that far off, and the L82, and I also did a video where we upgraded the L82 with lots of stuff, and it's a small block Chevy, so it does respond to all of that stuff, and obviously it's easy to make more power, and it also makes a lot more power if you add boost to it. Josh wants to know what the ideal upper and lower ring gap is. I put 30 thousandths on a 4-inch bore or so, even on a 5.3 or 4.8 that's less than 4 inches. I put between 28 and 30 thousandths. I do the same on the upper and lower because I know both of those are enough. Some guys alternate them, put less on the top or more on the bottom, and vice versa, depending on the ring manufacturer. For me, like when we were doing the Big Bang stuff, I just want to make sure that I have enough. And I know that between 28 and 30 thousandths on those motors, even at 30 pounds boost, is enough. So what I do is, if you look at that number, that's about 7 thousandths per inch of bore. Admiral wants a 2J. Everyone wants a 2J and a Barra and all these giant power number things. Lots of guys out there have done that. Guys that are much better at it than I am. They have lots of experience with 2Js and 4 rotors, which would be awesome. Or the Barra stuff, and make 1 million horsepower with those. But most of the people I think that watch my stuff are not that. They're low buck guys. Alex, if you look on the things, the email's been posted up there already. It's KillerB16 at AOL. It's in the comments. That's a good question, Robert Smith. Are you from The Cure? What is the cheapest E85 blow-through carburetor you know of? I actually can't answer that. Maybe somebody else knows. The only one I've ever run, well, we've run 2. We run from CSU, and then the other one, Quick Fuel makes an E85 blow-through carburetor also. But I don't know what the low buck options for those, and maybe guys can do it themselves. I've never tried to change one. Okay, Tim was mentioning, let's see. Tim said the J35 and the View is the same as the Honda Pilot. Okay. So I need to look in the Saturn Views. Joseph wants to know, have you ever seen a Jaguar V12 with the new carb intake manifolds installed? No, I have. I've never run a Jag. We've run one Jag motor that I can remember, but it was a 6-cylinder at West Tech. It was an old one, but no, I don't think I've ever seen a V12 there. Tyler wants to know what the highest horsepower motor I've done. Personally, for me, it's been the 1543 horsepower Big Bang 6-cylinder, the Gen 4 6-cylinder. That's as much as I've done. The one that I was helping run the dyno with the Hove, it's made more than that, but not a lot. I think it was 16 or 1700. ZX1206 wants to know, have you ever lost a good set of heads or cam in the Big Bang? Yes, on the nitrous motor, we destroyed the camshaft and the heads, although the heads I think can be repaired. And we have hurt other heads on some of the other Big Bang motors as well, which is the thing that I hate about putting good stuff on there, because we know that we're trying to break it, and we know what's going to break. It's going to be a rod or a piston. And when that does, it usually hurts something, valves or chamber or something on the head. Dukes of Hazzard. Would you rather run an LS with a carb or injection? It depends on what application you're trying to do. I'm not a carburetor or injection guy. I'm not a Ford or Chevy guy. I'm not a import or domestic guy. I like all of it, and all of it I know works. And guys that argue back and forth about, oh, you got to run fuel injection or you got to run a carburetor, that's nonsense. They all work. And usually the argument between carburation and fuel injection usually comes down to a manifold change anyway, and less about the fuel. But, guys want to argue about all kinds of stuff. Steve's Garage, I'd like to see some more 4-banger with ITBs. Yeah, the ITB stuff I like. And I've done that. If you take a look at there's videos up like with the Hemi where we had a stack injection. I think it was from Speedmaster. And then I made inserts so I can lengthen the stack. And they were really simple. All it was simple aluminum tubes that didn't even fit very well. As a matter of fact, if I just set the tubes in there, they would rattle around while the motor was running. So what I did was put hose clamps on them to use as a stop. And then we had to kind of wire them down so that they stayed in the same place. They were still leaning and doing all kinds of stuff, but it still works. It still shows what changes in runner length did, which is why I like adjustable manifolds like that. And especially on the stack stuff, it makes it really easy. Ramiro wants to see a Hemi versus Coyote versus LS. Yep, that would be good. Do I think an inch of runner length helps low speed power? I usually make my changes more than that. I like to make big changes to see what the big picture is, and then we can narrow it in on what we like to change. Sometimes an inch on a tunnel ram big block makes a big change. Sometimes an inch on I've run them on modular Fords and the Focus and Hondas and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes an inch doesn't really change it very much. By the Life Racing, how much is too much oil pressure? Yeah, we've had instances where you have too much oil pressure, and what it can do is, we're talking about 120 or 130 pounds, especially when the thing is cold. Obviously, life is much worse, and it can actually blow up the filter, which is not good. Then it sprays oil all over everywhere. Mark Hillman wants to know if throttle body spacers are useless. We have never seen any sort of power gain from any throttle body spacer, even the ones that have the twisty shape inside or whatever. We used to, back when I did the Ram Air technology stuff, we had phenolic spacers to try to change the temperature of the throttle body. But even looking at that, I mean, everybody sold those for 5-liter Mustangs, the phenolic spacers between the upper and lower manifold and all that stuff. And I'd like to do a lot more concerted effort on testing that to find out, because I want to do a video on the myth of heat soak, which will be interesting. Matt, that's a good question. I never have. When he wants to know, when you're testing for spool time, have I ever changed the acceleration rate of the dyno from, say, 300 RPM per second to 600 RPM per second? We can actually go to 1,000 RPM per second, which some of the really high horsepower, high RPM stuff, some of those guys like to run that at that. I don't like to do that because, I mean, the run is over in, a matter of seconds. But I haven't done that. And like I said, I've told lots of people this, that the engine dyno is not really a great place to see response rate the way that people want to see response rate. Because they want to see, like, okay, I'm driving in my car and then I step on the gas, and they want to see what the response rate is until they get boost. An engine dyno doesn't do that very well. A chassis dyno does it a little better, but actually where you're out there doing it is kind of the best place to determine that. The engine dyno will show us some of that. It will show us, like, in absolute terms, if we go to wide open throttle at 2,500 or 3,000 RPM and the turbos are not spooled up yet, no matter how long we hold it there, then you go, okay, well, they're not going to respond right there. No matter if you're driving down the road, they're not going to do that. And then if you release it and then they come up, you'll go, okay, well, probably they're going to come up somewhere in this range. And then if we make a change and we do see a change in response rate, you can kind of extrapolate from that out on the road, you would also see a change. But like I said, the engine dyno is not ideal for that. Misty y'all. How much boost can you make on stock injectors? You have to tell me what stock injector you're talking about, what size it is, and that will determine the flow rate. Take your stock injector, multiply it by 16. That will give you an idea of how much power it will make NA, and then subtract about 25%. And that will tell you what you'll be able to make under boost. It's going to be a really small number if it's a stock injector. Joseph Webb, what is the most reasonably priced turbo for a mild LS build? Go and get a GT45. I got mine from DNA, but there's lots of them on eBay and Amazon and every place, and that's good for about a 700 horsepower turbo. What's that? Only 96 likes? That's how many people like me? Man, I'm a little hurt. And I was like 90 of those. I just go in and click the like by myself. Ronald wants to know, is a Summit Stage 3 cam too big for a 6-liter turbo street car, the 7875? It's not too big. You don't need it to get, I would go with a smaller cam. If it's a street car, I'd actually go with a Stage 1 turbo cam. You could put a Stage 2 in there, but you're not going to get anything more out of the 7875. You could max out the 7875 with a LS9 cam. You could max it out with a Stage 1 turbo cam. You could get everything out of that turbo with a small cam. And the reason I like the small cam is then the thing's going to drive around better. That's what I would do. But you obviously, some guys like the chop. You know, they want a big cam. They want guys to know that they have a cam, and you can do that too. Ultimately, they will both, or all three of them, would make the same ultimate power because that's determined by the turbo itself. Tim wants to see a TD48 Nissan 6 Big Bang. Yeah, that's pretty obscure. I saw some Packard straight 8s, and what the heck else do we see there? I saw a Buick the last time we were there. That was a 455, but there were some oddball engines there too. I did see the one, the big GMC V6 that was there. That was kind of cool, but that was gone almost immediately. The Quad 4 was definitely on the list. There was a couple of Ecotechs the last time I were there. Those were cool. An AMC. Yeah, Jeff, I do want to do an AMC. I'd like to do a 401, but somebody I think came and offered me either a 304 or a 306 or 360. I mean, so yeah, I would like to do an AMC build up too, but I got to get the Buick and the Cadillac and stuff done before I get into another one of those. Infamous Nova, can you go over where to mount the lines on a blow through? When we run a blow through, you want to reference the lines to the fuel pressure regulator that are supplying fuel to the carburetor. You want that in the bonnet. We reference everything else from the bottom, from below the carburetor, so that we're getting a boost reading for the wastegates, for our boost gauge. I want to know what the boost is basically in the manifold after that. But you want immediate pressure going to the regulators, so that the pressure to the carburetor will always be 7 pounds plus whatever boost is, or whatever pressure you have, whatever static pressure you have your carburetor set at. The Cadillac is giving you heartburn. How many times it has died? It's only died on me once or twice now. I guess twice. But now I'm going to put it back together, and it's going to run right, and I'm not going to do dumb things with it, and it should be happy. We did find two of the 2-liter, Tim. We found 2 of the 2-liter Ecotechs. One of them was damaged because it had been in a fire. I found one of the supercharged Cobalt, one in a supercharged Cobalt SS, and the other one was in a Solstice. The turbo version was in a Solstice. Have you ever thought about doing a Turbo 350 Oldsmobile? No, and Olds is another one I'd want to do. I'd like to do a 455 Olds if I can. Although somebody, again, I think somebody offered me a 403 maybe, the 6.6 liter in the Trans Am. I know I do, Tim. I do want to find a draw-through turbo with carbon seals. Alex, I'll check. I'll check you. I'll check the my email. Guys have sent me a lot of information on VTEC V8s. After I posted that video. Dennis, I agree. I like the 22R. I don't think I'll do a big bang on one of those, but I've always liked those motors. I like those little Toyota trucks too. Those are fantastic. Yes, if you're infamous Nova, if your carb and intake has no provisions for vacuum, you can drill and tap the manifold. You can put a spacer in there and drill and tap the spacer. That's what we normally did when we were running stuff under the CSU carburetor. Is we had a 1/2 inch, carb spacer, and then we drilled holes in that so we could run all the lines off of that. Dick's out. Dick's nice. Well, going shorter duration on a cam with the same lift still help with low speed power. I still want to tame my Ford 302. Yeah, less duration will help low speed power. If you don't like the F303 cam, that's a fairly mild cam. It's not the best cam, obviously, that you can use, but if you look at the power of an F303 compared to a stock cam, the stock cam probably makes a little bit more way low speed power. But by 3,000 RPM, that F cam should probably be better. I have to go back and look at my data back when I ran all the Alphabet cams to see where the crossover was on those. Man, that was a long time ago that I ran all those cams. Thomas, yeah, is a turbo engine good for autocross? He said he watched David Freiberger in a 4-door Malibu and a 350 beat Lucky Costa's 2-door supercharged LS Malibu. That's probably not turbo versus supercharger as it is a lot of other things versus a lot of other things. But yeah, you can make a turbo work there. Lots of guys run the turbo Cobalts, the turbo Solsas, those as autocross cars and stuff. Yeah, you can make that work without any problem. Daniel wants to know what the wind velocity is. I don't know. We had really high winds not long ago, but it's very cold here, and we think it's going to probably rain, or it might snow. We might get some snow. Peter wants to know if you can do a roots blower with nitrous. Yes, you can. Freiberger did a test on that not too long ago, and I've run nitrous on a roots blower under the carburetors, and it works really well. It gains a lot of power. Tyler, an 89 Ford Probe turbo. Yeah, if you remember back in the day, they had the 5-liter Mustang, they had the Turbo Probe, they had the Super Coupe, and they had a V8 Thunderbird, and all of those were like 140-mile-an-hour cars, which is pretty cool. Yeah, junkyard turbos, Joseph, can be adapted to LS. You can get. We used to run a lot of junkyard turbo T-Bird and SVO turbo. Most of them are T-Birds because the SVOs were hard to find. But the turbo T-Bird stuff, we used to use those on Hondas all the time. So junkyard turbos work good. Yeah, Patrick, set the rings at 28 thousandths. Mind block, I don't know. I'd have to look at your fuel pump size. Is this so it's an EFI setup. So you're going to need something big. You're going to need at least an HD 8088. You're going to need something really big. I would put an aeromotive pump or something like that on there. How much boost can a small Journal 327 handle? It's not going to be the block, and it's not going to be the crank on that. So you're more worried about the rods and the pistons. That's the thing that would break ultimately in that. Yes, the Starry and Turbo. I really love those cars. I had one for a little while. $5, $2 from Julius. I'm James. Okay. Thanks for your help, James. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Julius, good day. See, that's got to be Australian, right? Julius, what's up, man? ICT Car Guy 316. I have a Super Coupe I need to send to the salvage yard. How could you do that to a Super Coupe, man? Yes, Matthew, the L33 can take 700 horsepower reliable. The L33 stock bottom end can take twice that. So you're fine at 700. Just make sure to put ring gap in it and you're all good. Vic wants to know the max overbore size on a Gen 5 453. I don't know what a 453 is. Or you're talking about a I'm sure you're talking about an L83, a Gen 5 5.3 liter. I honestly don't know. I don't know about that's a good question. I don't know what that is. I'd have to look. We have one of those, but I don't know how big you can go on the bore size. If anybody knows, Tim might know. He's usually pretty sharp on that stuff. Jaylan, I'm building a 347. Says ring gap for boost is 65. No, it's 0.0065 per thousandths per 1 inch of bore. I mean, per 1 inch of bore. So what you're going to want to run is 28 thousandths on a 347. John Wient, 255 external pump with factory pump on the C5 twin turbo. I don't think the 255 liter per hour pump is going to be enough for that. I think you probably need 2 of those. Silverado, are the 6.1, 6.4 Hemis already stroker motors? I don't know how. It's from the factory, so technically not. Stroker motors usually are something that you upgrade. The 6.4 is a 392, so that's a fairly common stroker size for the 6.1. But you can argue back and forth about whether, since the factory did it, whether it is a stroker motor. MB wants to know the ring gap for a 5.3 twin turbo between 28 and 30 thousandths for both the top and the second ring. Julius is covered in hydraulic fluid. It's 106. Man, that's not good. Yeah, Tim, I don't know about the iron block on the 5.3 either. I don't know what the maximum bore size is. Matthew, $10. I'm happy to help, man. And again, like I said, this isn't about that. I just want to hang out and talk car guy stuff. But I do have about 2 more minutes, and I got to get going. See, Jonathan, that's the guy. Matt, thank you. Capisi is the guy that I was trying to think of. He's done really cool stuff with L33s. He's made really, really big power. So if you want to see stock bottom end stuff with that particular motor, especially, he's done big power. Robert Smith, I remember my first turbo vehicle was a 92 Dodge Caravan with a 2.5 turbo. Those are good. I remember guys back in the day running 10s in those things. Yeah, the oil ring, we leave them stock. You just have a minimum clearance on the oil ring. It's 15 or 16 thousandths. MB, $5. And no question. You guys got to ask a question, man. Antonio, I bought 2 GT35 or GT45 turbos for my 5.3. They're going in a jet boat. Should I sell them and buy GT35s? It depends on how much power you want. The GT35s are about 1,000 horsepower. The GT45s can do more than that. If you don't need 1,000 horsepower, then put the smaller ones on. They'll be very responsive. Although on a jet boat, you don't have to worry about the response rate quite as much because the jet boat is like a high stall converter. As soon as you whack on the gas, you go to a lot of RPM, and that helps. The GT35s, if you're going to do less than 1,000 horsepower, probably would be a better deal, though. Jamie, what's up for $10? What size turbo for a 4-liter Jeep 195 horse stock? about 300. And an air-to-air, probably like the little GT35s would be good. They're really cheap out there. There's lots of sources from them. I'm trying a set from Max Speeding. We also try a set from CX Racing, but that's a really good size for that particular application. And I may try one of those on the 292 Chevy 6-cylinder as well. And then I do want to do a Jeep, because a 4-liter Jeep is very, very popular. And I got people, as soon as I run anything on the inline 6-cylinder, everybody jumps on, you need to do a Ford and you need to do a Jeep. Both of those that I want to do. Okay, one more minute. Smoky Burnout. Okay, you get the last question of the night. What size injectors would you use on a 6-liter with an LSA supercharger on E85? It depends on your power level. 80-pound injectors will get you in the 700 to 800 horsepower range, probably on E85. If you're going to do more than that, we use 1,000cc injectors. Or even 1500s, depending on if you want to go way up. But 1,000cc injector will get you pretty far with that. I don't know how much boost you're going to run, but that supercharger, if it's a factory supercharger, that's probably right in the realm there. Again, size the injector for your power output. If you want 1,500 horsepower, then you have to have 1,500 horsepower injectors there. Jen Steinberg, what are you doing? From Sweden. $200. So you wanted to like just jump right up to the leaderboard, like you don't care about what everybody else is thinking. You're just like, those are rookie numbers, so you're just stepping all the way up. And I was getting ready to turn this thing off too. Now I guess I can. So what's going on in Sweden? I have relatives in Norway, so we're kind of neighbors. I have a 355 with forged H-beam rods and forged flat tops, stock crank, good heads, intake, and an XR288 cam. What do you think that engine can take in boost before breaking the 2-bolt block? I honestly think that you're not going to hurt the 2-bolt block. Well, you know, did you say you have forged flat tops? Is it a cast crank? I don't know which will go first. I'm kind of thinking that the block will be the thing, and then the cast crank. If you have forged pistons and rods, that's already good. And you said you have a stock crank, so I'm assuming that it's cast. You're going to be living on borrowed time with the crank and the 2-bolt block. So that being said, we've done 600-700 horsepower stuff a lot on 2 bolts. So I haven't gone more than that, and I haven't found out what the limit is on the 2-bolt stuff. So I would say you're probably safe in that range, but can you get a 4-bolt block? I hope that answers your question. I wouldn't go crazy on a 2-bolt block, because I think that the crank is gonna move around on that. Go for broke off road, $20. Okay, I have to get out of here before people keep giving me money. I can't be having that. It makes me feel guilty. See, Tim, yeah, 30,000 spring gap. Maybe I should just constantly post that, because it's you know. I know. Add more boost. It's $25, but 200 sounds better. You know, you're up on the leaderboard with 200. And they're kroners. No one's ever pledged kroners to me, which I think is awesome. But yes, the 2-bolt block is going to be your limiting thing. So make sure that you take care when you're doing that, and also think about boost control too, because torque is going to be it's going to rear its ugly head and make stuff move around on the block and the crank, I think. So yeah, that's what you're going to kind of have to worry about. Go for broke. No questions for you? Come on. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you for showing up. I stayed on a lot longer than I thought. I was going to be on like an hour, which seems to be kind of about the limit. But we stayed on longer than that. Make sure if you haven't checked it out, go take a look at the 305 and 350 video. I got to get to work on another video because, you know, every day, a new video. Thanks for showing up, guys. I will talk to you all tomorrow.